Because Mayans, they have similar,
Well, I've never heard of bark being used as to be eaten. When it comes to tribes, they use bark in a magical type of concoction or something. They grind it up and make it into like a paste for something. Or they take bark and they rip strings of the wood out of it and then sew it together into something.
Right.
Weave
it together.
Yeah, weave it together.
But in the Kicked Out of Heaven, they talk about eating.
Right. No, you're right. In the weather section where they had to eat bark, and there's also a section. There's also a mention of it in the torture where it was against the law for peasants to go and eat bark because the peasants were looked at as shit. But like it says in the book, the peasants were 9/10 of the society. Okay, so if you were caught as a peasant eating bark off of a tree, they would take your intestines out and nail it to the tree and then beat you while you walked around the tree until your intestines fell out.
The cell.
Until your whole, yeah. And then I got the intestine crank. I got a picture of that and how they used it on paintings inside the book. So, the food, you got the pork jelly, you got the reverse jelly eels, okay? We have the sheep's head with wool, boiled.
And they were eating chitlins back then.
Yeah, they were eating chitlins, the intestines of all the different animals. Feathered duck, yes. They eat it with the feathers on. Pies with live birds, all of that, yeah. It's all there. It's all So, yeah. And then the clothing, I go through the clothing because
the layers.
There's a lot of, I mentioned about the layers, and that was important. I mentioned that in the beginning too, and that's why I put that little key right there where it talks about how they compiled the filth on them, like the layers of the earth has different levels of crust, and that's correlated with their clothing as well. So I put that on there, and the depravity of cloth and all of that too. Is why they couldn't, there wasn't much availability to change.
Not only that, but I felt like they didn't really have a lot of place to leave their shit, so they had to have all their possessions on them at all times. Right.
That is true. They had to have their possessions with them on them at all times because there is reports of people stealing socks and stealing drawers and stealing, pants from each other.
Really to wash.
Right, and then your ass get hung if you stole some linen or some cloth from somebody. But in volume 2 we're talking about the dyeing of cloth and how they used colors and how they created colors, and I even got some paintings talking about how they said it was the devil. The devil is what taught the dyers how to dye their clothing. That's what they say. So good.
Their hairs and macaroni.
Yeah, the hair and the hair. I put that in there to show that there's a hair section for men, and then I got another hair section for the women, which was two different things. The hairs and for the men, I put it in there because it's social. There's a lot of social class system rules that you'll read on, like, oh, we didn't allow men with beards during this time period, or if you were to come in the city and you had this type of haircut, you had to have a certain coin, to give to the gatekeeper when you came into the city, and and that's also incorporated with today, in today's corporate structure. Your hair, your beard, your mustache, all have different symbology, okay, and affect their minds. Their minds are very light, and as soon as that hair trigger gets pulled, the dragon comes. So that's why I put that in there. But go ahead, what's the next one? Which one?
The perfume, how they created that just because of the stench. Remember, you'd be traveling 5 miles from the town, and
the toilet
wind was blowing.
Yeah, eau de toilette. That's what it's called, right?
Yes. Till today, it's still
right. That's because shit in the toilet smelled greater than the air. Right. They had to put their face in the toilet to give them a fresh smell, because the smell alone could kill during those times, and I have that documented in a lot of different areas in the book. So go ahead. What's the next one?
The orders, the nobles, and the knights.
Oh, I put that in there because there's a million different orders out there, and I mean, you'd be sitting there for days and days and days. I mean, if you were to talk about all the orders that they erected during those time periods, and that's why I put the silly order like the Cow's Head Club, which also talks about the stake.
The coat of arms.
The stake, yeah, and the coat of arms that they use. Now, coat of arms is very important, and like I stated inside the book, you know, you need to, coat of arms and heraldry is a very important study, man, because that controls everything that you know out here. When it comes to, you know, the shields that police officers use, to the shields on your highways, state patrol signs,
right.
to the Cadillac is another herald with the golden fleece around it, and then the Porsche is a herald with the horse. You need to understand the horses, the swans, the lions, the dragons, the eagles, the double-headed eagle, what the wings mean when they're up, or what the wings mean when they're down, or what the wings mean when they're closed. All those different things mean shit. The lion rampant, the lion fossé, the fleur-de-lis, all that shit. You need to learn all that shit, man, because when you understand that language, you understand who is running what by what faction. Okay? And when you understand that, you know your environment better, and you know how to operate a little bit better. If you are historically literate, and then due to the fact that you would be historically literate, guess what? You stand out a little bit greater to those who operate and run shit. And they're going to do what? Come at you with respect, because obviously what you either come from a line that knows the information and has passed it down, or you are just one of those highly intelligent ones from the stars that did your goddamn due diligence, and we respect you because of that. You understand? People don't understand how this shit works. That's why when I get pulled over, the police officer says, "Oh, why don't you have your gun on you?" I don't get the fucking bullshit because of the way I carry myself and the way my whole aura is built, the way my whole shit is built. Regardless of all the shit I done did up in the Black Man's Bible. You dig what I'm saying? But yeah, but keep moving. What's the next one?
The women and children in the marriage, like they talk about divorce. Like, how do you think the divorce? How do you think those proceedings were versus how it's done today? Because today you divorce, you get 50, you get alimony, spousal support, you get all this stuff. Like, there was nothing like that, even close to that. Like,
well, at that time, the man was favored at all times with all things.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, how do you? Because nowadays, divorce, the bitch gets half. She gets alimony support. She gets child support. She gets all the support.
You know, it's kind of funny you were saying this, and I'm gonna go ahead and lay this secret out. Satan gets pussy from the woman. So if you worship Satan for too long, Satan's just going to give everything to the woman. Because the woman understands Satan.
Wowzers, the black man. The one dressed in black. Is that where all his bastards...
And so the woman runs shit right now. Because Satan runs shit. Because they've been worshiping Satan. And Satan's been like, well, she's been the one fucking with me.
She took the bite of the
apple.
apple.
Dude just take right, which the bite of the apple I believe is a cuckold story. I believe Adam and Eve and the snake is a cuckold story. Okay.
It sounds like it.
It's a cuckold story, and that's how the Bible has started out. It's a cuckold story, and then you get told to multiply and plenish the earth, and then guess what? We're gonna give you two boys. We tell you to replenish the earth, but we're going to give you 2 sons. Makes a lot of sense. Right. So, I believe Adam and Eve is a cuckold story, and I also believe the reasoning being on why the women run things today is because this is Lucifer's planet, man, and I can't, and that's not something that I'm over here with no altars and no crazy shit. That's just something I figured out. You dig what I'm saying? I'm not worshiping anything of anything. I'm just telling you what I figured out, man. And that's the end all be all. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. And I'm pretty confident I can destroy any historian or theologist who wants to debate me on it. I know enough. It says it right there in the Bible. Isaiah 14:12. And Revelations 22:15, I think it is. Let me see. I got a Bible right here. I'm not even gonna look it up. But that's what I think the verses are. Isaiah 14:12 and Revelation 22:15. It blatantly states it. Jesus Christ says he's the all shining light in the morning light, and then Lucifer says he's the same bearer of the same light. They're both one and the same thing, and that's what I'm going to be explaining in volume 2. You know, because that's the way this Western civilization has been coded.
But do you think it's because, again, all the weather, all the conditions, and like you said, the men were praised, right, and everything like that. And the gang rapes on women, how it was just, you know, a woman was made for fucking at all times. Anyone's welcome to it. Do you think that's what kind of forced the woman into the procurer, you know, the courtesan role?
No, well,
she had nothing else.
Let's talk about the free-for-all fucking first before we go to the procurer. Let's talk about the free-for-all fucking. Because I think that was the viewing of a lot of animals. There's animals running around everywhere at all times, and these are animals that are domesticated hybrid animals. So they're not even natural animals. Mm-hmm. Natural animals have sex only by astrological season and alignment. Okay? Let's keep that clear. You go down there to Africa, the panthers and all of them. Well, I don't know. I can't exclusively say that about mammals because I haven't done research on mammals in that area. But from what I have seen, when it comes to birds or when it comes to other animals, they only meet up when the moon is in this certain pattern or when these planets are in these certain position. The water animals move on the same note. I've seen reptiles move on the same note as well. So I'm pretty much assuming that mammals like panthers and lions do the same damn thing. Now, those are for natural animals. Hybrid animals, and when animals are domesticated, they go into all types of weird patterns. They go into weird sexual patterns, weird sleeping patterns. They go into weird relationship patterns, and they go into weird communication patterns when it comes to mother and son, the generational line. Okay, for instance, if you hamsters that eat their babies if they're born in captivity. You see, so it's shit like that. You see what I'm saying? Now I say all that to state that the Caucasians were walking around seeing this type of stuff at all times. And not only that, they had to force mate a lot of animals for eating purposes. Mm-hmm. When it came to pigs, cows, whatever the case, the yak, and even horses. Because during these times, a lot of people don't know, but there was specific horses bred for specific things. Mm-hmm. Okay? The night horses were specifically war horses that went through war practices and war shit, and they kept those bloodlines within those war horse. Right. So I'm stating that there was a lot of forced mating. Okay. So this is an animalistic understanding. Animals, they stick their nose in your cock and then they fuck you.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
Nature.
Okay. They stick their nose up your ass. The dog, watching the dog, which the dog was man's best friend during this time. Mm-hmm. And you also have to understand that dogs were bred in the same format horses were bred for exclusive different reasons. They had home protector dogs, castle protector dogs, they had all different hunting dogs, they had all different types of dogs for different reasons, okay? Including the women and the noble ladies who started having lap dogs later on. Okay, which you start seeing in paintings, I think around 1400, 1500. Okay, and that's including with hawks. Motherfuckers is walking around with hawks, and I don't got a lot of that information inside the volume. But please understand that they got very large details on how they trained hawks and caught them. And how they bred them and the whole yarn.
How they trained a lot.
Right, how they trained them. And I mean, it's very detailed. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying all of that is their brains were overly programmed with how animals mated. And then they wanted to stay away from that. But then at the same time, they wanted the freedom. Okay? And the animals have the freedom. Mm-hmm. Okay? And being overloaded in a society that's being controlled by a church that doesn't do what it say do. And we all know the priests are out here fucking every goddamn body. Okay, and the priests are known to go down there to the peasants and fuck all the peasants' wives. Okay, so with that being stated, why the fuck am I gonna wholeheartedly fall into the box of the religious when the animal has saved my life more than the religion has? Say when the plague comes through, and sometimes animals would be affected by the plague, and sometimes they wouldn't. Okay, and then they had to eat. So their eating sources was the animal. Okay, so there's more worship towards the animal because the animal has more to do with the whether this is a conscious understanding or a subconscious exception. You see what I'm saying? You can accept things subconsciously and unconsciously that you don't even got in the conscious lobe as a recognition. You see what I'm saying? So they're accepting. That's why I put that little key right there where it talks about how they compiled the filth on them, like the layers of the earth has different levels of crust, and that's correlated with their clothing as well. So I put that on there, and you know, the depravity of cloth and all of that too is why they couldn't. You know, there wasn't much availability to change.
Not only that, but I felt like they didn't really have a lot, because Mayans, they have similar, you know.
Well, I've never heard of bark being used as to be eaten. When it comes to tribes, they use bark in a magical type of concoction or something. They grind it up and make it into like a paste for something. You know, or they take bark and they rip strings of the wood out of it and then sew it together into something.
Right.
You know,
weave it together.
Yeah, weave it together.
Yeah, but in the chitlins back then.
Yeah, they were eating chitlins, the intestines of all the different animals. Feathered duck, yes. They eat it with the feathers on. Pies with live birds, all of that, yeah. It's all there. It's all So yeah, and then the clothing, I go through the clothing because
the layers.
There's a lot of, I mentioned about the layers, and that was important. I mentioned that in the beginning too. And nail it to the tree and then beat you while you walked around the tree until your intestines fell out.
The cell.
Until your whole, yeah. And then I got the intestine crank. I got a picture of that and how they used it on paintings inside the book. So, yeah, the food, you know, you got the pork jelly, you got the reverse jelly eels, okay? We have the sheep's head with wool.
Boiled. They were eating. Kicked out of heaven. They talk about eating.
Right. No, you're right. In the weather section where they had to eat bark, and there's also a section. There's also a mention of it in the torture where it was against the law for peasants to go and eat bark because the peasants were looked at as shit. But like it says in the book, the peasants were 9/10 of the society. Okay, so if you were caught as a peasant eating bark off of a tree, they would take your intestines out and